It's a feeling that's flowing like a river. Time to swap them dollar signs for dreams. There's a river running through it and it flows through you and me.
I'm John Osborne. In today's program, we're going to be reviewing several movies as well as looking at some pressing water issues in eastern Washington. And in future programs, we'll also be introducing you to ongoing areas of conflict as it relates to water and land in the Northwest. We'll start with a discussion of a movie called The Comma. The Comma is a movie about family farmers, dryland wheat farmers in eastern Washington. These are fourth-generation farmers. If you go out on their farms, the land is rolling. That you'll see the houses that are scattered across the landscape, and it's dry. And the water for these homes derives from wells. The wells go down generally about 700 feet. And this is the source of water for their homes. It's their drinking water. Certainly they're not using this water as part of their farming production. The reason that we've been filming this movie called The Comma is that the farmers have become the subject of really horrendous decisions in the state of Washington, and the decisions that have really created chaos in the way in which the state manages groundwater. So in about 2008, in August, the farmers became aware that there was a large corporate feedlot, cattle feedlot, that was proposed amongst their farms. This is an operation called Easterday Ranches. And really the fix was in almost from the beginning. The county government notified them late. They were really forced. They were on the defensive almost from the very beginning. They called up the Center for Environmental Law and Policy, Rachel Osborne, and sought help. And so with the help of public interest water lawyers, including Jeanette Brimmer with Earth Justice and Kristen Boyle, also with Earth Justice, these farmers really went on a long journey of trying to protect their drinking water. And the movie is called The Comma because the device by which Easterday claimed water was a reinterpretation of a 60-year-old statute by the Attorney General McKenna. And what McKenna did was he looked at the law and he says, you know, because of the absence of a comma, these large corporate feedlots can have unlimited amounts of groundwater. So that statute, which was passed in 1945, provided small rural farmers with up to 5,000 gallons per day for their household use and also for stock. But certainly it was never envisioned and never interpreted for 60 years that the amount of water available to stock operations, these large corporate factory feedlots, would be unlimited. But that's what Rob McKenna did when he reinterpreted that 1945 statute. So in so doing, McKenna opened the groundwaters of the state of Washington to corporate ag. The impact wasn't readily apparent. His interpretation came in 2005, but it wasn't until 2008 when the family farmers, Scott and Jeannie Collins, Randy Jones, the Herons, and others, suddenly became aware of what was proposed. Why this is significant is because the water in the underground is ancient water. This water is probably 10,000 years old, 20,000 years old, and there are aquifers, groundwaters in the area that are in real trouble. Just to the north, there are groundwaters in a place called the Odessa sub-area, where the groundwaters are dropping, up to 10 feet per year. And the state knew this, and yet the state has condoned the mining of these aquifers, even as the state government has now opened the door to further pumping of these ancient waters in these deep aquifers. So the farmers turned to the institutions of state government and sought protection. And really at every turn, the institutions have let them down. Certainly the Attorney General, in his interpretation of the CAMA, dealt a real blow to these farmers. But when the farmers turned to the court system and to the regulatory agency, the Washington Department of Ecology, they have had bad decisions at every turn. So, for example, the Washington Department of Ecology has looked the other way at the permitting for this large cattle feedlot. So we have this massive feedlot for 30,000 head of cattle, and there is no effort to look at cumulative effects from other operations in the area. In the filming of the CAMA, we were out near the feedlot, and the stench is really quite incredible. If we could produce scratch and sniff movies and allow the audience to really get a flavor for how awful it is, it would be impressive. It's stench that these family farmers have to endure nearly every day. But the state really looked the other way and encouraged this large corporate feedlot to go in. So beginning in late April, early May of 2011, and through the remainder of the year, we filmed a series of interviews with the family farmers, and also went on site to film the feedlot, to film just the spraying of water just over the cattle. So you have to picture 30,000 cattle, and then it's out there. It's very dry. It's very hot, and so there are these massive sprinklers that are sprinkling this ancient fossil water over these cattle. The water itself comes from a well that's 1,600 feet deep, so goes down well below the 700-foot level of most of the wells of these family farmers. And so you have this kind of irrigation system that's going on. In addition, the operator, the owner, Easterday Corporation, is also irrigating crops just adjacent to these 30,000 head of cattle. And then it was interesting because we set up the camera close to the entranceway to the cattle feedlot, and you could of course the cattle trucks were moving in and out, and so we did a series of interviews there with cattle trucks rolling. Not too far away is a large slaughterhouse that's owned by Tyson Corporation, and so one of the things that we did is that we also went down to Tyson and we set up the camera there and then filmed as the cattle trucks kind of came down the highway and then pulled into the parking lot there at Tyson Corporation. So by the end of the year, and of course you have to know that all through this period, the challenge of the family farmers to Attorney General McKenna's interpretation of the comma, that challenge is making its way through the court. And so in November, we did a series of interviews with the farmers. And by now, the farmers know that they're in big trouble. The level of water in their wells is dropping up to, for some, they've noticed that the water levels have dropped by 20 feet, and the temperature of the water is increasing by 10 degrees, probably because of the upwelling of water way down. This water is way down underground, and so as you pump, you're bringing up other fossil waters, and the temperature is going up. So during the interviews, by the end of the year, the farmers knew that they were in trouble and that the system had really failed them. And then just 3 days before Christmas, 4 days before Christmas, the Supreme Court, in keeping with this whole series of terrible decisions that has impacted these farmers and the groundwaters of the state, the Supreme Court also failed these farmers and sided with Rob McKenna in 6-3. The only, perhaps, the only silver lining in that decision was that 3 of the justices got it right, and they challenged, in a minority opinion, the decision relating to the comma. It was also interesting because while we were not allowed to film oral argument before the justices, it was interesting because of the number of corporate representatives who were in the Supreme Court. Certainly they weren't wearing their big cowboy hats. There's certainly a lot of wearing of boots, but they made it very clear to the justices that the cattlemen and other corporate interests were very much paying attention to this oral argument. So where are we left today? We're left with telling the story, a very important story about what's happened to these family farmers because of the interests of corporate ag and the decision by Attorney General Rob McKenna in opening the waters of the state for the absence of the comma. So I want to talk next about a film that we've recently completed about uranium mining on the Spokane Indian Reservation. This is an interview of Deborah Abrahamson, who is director of SHAL, which stands for Sovereignty, Health, Air, Land, and Water. Shaul and Deb Abrahamson have been struggling with the pollution that's left from uranium mining on the reservation. It wasn't really that clear when we did the interview with Deb down near the Spokane arm of Lake Roosevelt. But it became quite clear when we looked at the Google images, the Google Earth images of these two large open pits and their juxtaposition to the waters of Lake Roosevelt. Now you have to understand that Lake Roosevelt wasn't always there. What was there was a river called the Spokane River, and with the construction of Grand Coulee Dam and the rising of the waters behind the dam, the reservoir was created, and the waters rose up and covered, flooded out the native river. The dam didn't just flood out that river, but it also blocked the runs of salmon. The Spokane tribe is a fish-eating tribe, and the loss of those runs of salmon that the tribal people had known from time immemorial, was a terrible loss. And more was to come as the mining companies began to look for uranium and found it for the ore on the reservation. And so today, you have this really incredible pollution problem on the reservation. You know, as Deb talks about in the movie, Water is Life, It's Sacred, you have the problem with contamination of the native foods and wildlife. You can imagine what it was like not only to lose salmon, but now to be afraid of eating deer or elk because they might be contaminated with radioactive waste. So really a story of commitment by Deb Abrahamson and tribal people to regain a way of life on the reservation and to really insist on cleaning up after this incredible couple of open pits. So that movie is available. The name of the movie is Water is Life, It's Sacred, and strongly encourage that you take a moment to look at that movie. To access the movie, go to water-life-sacred.com. And finally, I want to talk about some of the mine waste pollution in the Columbia River region. And Spokane was once, really it was the hub of one of the world's great, most productive mining districts. The Coeur d'Alene mining district, there were mining districts in British Columbia and elsewhere. And the mines have played out, many of them have closed, and so now Spokane is really the hub of some of the worst mine waste contamination on the planet. And part of that is the Coeur d'Alene mining district. So there, as a result of hard rock mining, mining companies dumped about 100 million tons of mine wastes into the river, and water flows downhill, and with that flow went the waste. The waste contained lead, cadmium, zinc, and arsenic. So first, as the gradient began to lower, the river, which had been up above is a fast-moving stream, but down below is meandering across a wetland of about 14,000 acres, the water settled out and dropped out the mine wastes. And so now there is about 100 million tons of toxic material across this wetland, a place that biologists call a killing field. The river flows into Idaho's second largest lake, and that's called Lake Coeur d'Alene. And on the lake bottom is about 70 million tons of toxic material. The lake itself is an inefficient trap for the mine wastes, and some of those wastes travel through the lake and exit into the Spokane River. And with that water goes the mine waste and contaminating beaches and polluting the waters of the Spokane River. For about the last 30 years, we have attempted to persuade the Forest Service, the U.S. Forest Service, responsible for these forested watersheds in North Idaho and elsewhere, to protect these forested watersheds. And there's a reason for that. First of all, forested watersheds are important anyway. They clean water, fisheries, wildlife are all important. And especially as we are in this period of climate change, protecting biological integrity is really essential. But there's something that's really quite unique about these watersheds. First of all, these watersheds are in a certain elevation called rain-on-snow belts. And so what happens is there is a large accumulation of snow, and then there will be a melting event, usually because we have a type of meteorologic weather event called a Chinook, where we get suddenly a lot of rain and warm temperatures, or we'll just get a sudden melt. And so a significant amount of water is released from these snowy mountainous slopes. Now, if you have massive clear cuts and you have tremendous road densities, logging road densities, then the watershed simply can't hold on to the water. And so you just see a tremendous amount of water that's released. Well, so you have these flood events, and if you go downstream, if you follow the floods downstream, where does that water go? Well, it goes out on a floodplain. And what's covering the floodplain? Massive amounts of mine waste. And so we actually anticipated that this would be a problem. And so in 1995, I actually testified before Senator Larry Craig and his subcommittee, and I had with me large pictures, two of them, one of a clear cut from the Coeur d'Alene National Forest, and the other from the killing fields. It was a swan that had died from lead poisoning in the wetlands. And the point I was making then, and continue to make with the federal government, is that the problem with the watershed is inherently connected to the problems of the floodplain with the mine wastes. In 1996, the Northwest suffered massive flooding. The U.S. Geologic Survey actually sampled the floodwaters of the Coeur d'Alene, and they estimated that over 1 million pounds, probably about 1.4 million pounds in a single day, 1.4 million pounds of lead in a single day washed from those floodplains into Lake Coeur d'Alene. Again, the lake is an inefficient trap, and about 40% of these mine wastes then entered the Spokane River and contaminated the Spokane River. So for the last 30 years, we have attempted to persuade the Forest Service to protect these forested watersheds, to stop logging, to stop the road building, to allow these forested watersheds to heal. We have had a series of meetings with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, which since the 1990s has been assessing the environmental and human health impacts from these mine wastes. EPA designated a 1,500 square mile Superfund site that is intended to provide a way to clean up these mine wastes. But when you talk to EPA and say, you must deal with these forested watersheds. These watersheds must be stabilized in order to minimize the flooding that is moving metals into the lake and the Spokane River. EPA has steadfastly declined to take action. And when you talk to the Forest Service and you convey to the Forest Service, as the federal agency responsible for these forested watersheds, you have to understand that down below are floodplains that are heavily contaminated with lead, cadmium, and zinc. The Forest Service has steadfastly declined to acknowledge the relationship between what it does in the watershed and metal movement into the lake and the Spokane River. And so the citizen effort continues. And citizens are taking action to try to let others know what's at stake, and in the end encourage both federal agencies to work together to protect and restore the watersheds and the waters of the Spokane River. And that's today's program. Thank you for listening, and thank you for caring about water, about the land, and about the future of our communities.
It's a feeling that's flowing like a river. Time to swap them dollar signs for dreams.